I know in America there was, and in Canada, there was this thing where white people kneeled in front of black people apologizing. Like, what are you apologizing for? Like, and what's up, guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is Chico Moya. If you've never been to my channel before, consider subscribing. I know I haven't said anything yet, but do it anyway. And for those of you who have been on my channel before, this is going to be a little different type of video. I want to talk a little bit about race and the way we interact with race in the world today. And I'm going to be reacting to a TED Talk that I found very insightful in this area. Because, you know, for me personally, someone who's got friends of different races and genders and whatever, I have to say the color of someone's skin is the least interesting thing about a person. It's literally only skin deep. The things that I think about most is the content of someone's heart, what someone is like. Are they kind and gracious and compassionate, or are they a piece of shit? Being a piece of shit doesn't care about color. It doesn't care about gender. You can be the blackest person on the planet and be an ass, or the whitest person on the planet and be an ass. I mean, this isn't anything new. We all know this. The fact that we focus on color so much, I feel it divides us more. We need to start attempting to treat people because of or what they are like, not because of their skin color. It's just ridiculous to me. And this obviously spills over into other areas of life as you start getting into politics and the type of laws that are passed and that sort of stuff. We need to find a way to bridge that gap. And I think that the way the world is going now, fixating on race as though race is the defining characteristic of a human being, I feel like that way of treating race is really damaging, and it misses so much nuance, and it's stupid in my humble opinion. So I want to react to this TED Talk, and I will be stopping quite a lot in between. So if you end up wanting to watch the whole thing, I'll leave the link below.
I want to do a quick exercise. Close your eyes. I want you to picture your best friend. Think about what specifically you love about them. What trait makes them them? Now open your eyes. I don't know what each of you came up with, but I'm pretty sure I know what you didn't come up with. I'm pretty sure none of you thought, what makes Jim Jim is the fact that he's 6'2" and a redhead. I'm guessing you chose their inner qualities, their sense of humor, their generosity, their intelligence, qualities they would have no matter what they looked like. There's one more quality I'm pretty sure you didn't choose: their race. Of all the things you could list about somebody, their race is just about the least interesting you could name, right down there with height and hair color.
Just as a quick note, this TED Talk was basically blackballed. It got so much pushback. Like, people were genuinely angry. And as we watch this, I want you to think to yourself, what is he saying that is so controversial? Once you get it, I want you to put it down in the comments below.
Sure, race can be good source material for jokes at a comedy club, but in the real world, a person's race doesn't tell you whether they're kind or selfish, whether their beliefs are right or wrong, whether they'll become your best friend or your worst enemy. But over the past 10 years, our societies have become more and more fixated on racial identity. We've all been invited to reflect on our inner whiteness or inner blackness as if these racial essences define who we are.
I find that sort of talking point so cringe, right? When people like reflect on your inner blackness or your inner whiteness. I'm like, what? I'm not black on the inside. That actually, I would have to be a zombie or something, right? Like, I find that very silly. It's like, yo, I'm so much more than the skin deep level of my skin color, right? And yet we make that the center of what defines a person.
Meanwhile, American society has experienced the greatest crisis in race relations in a generation. Gallup has been asking Americans how they feel about race relations, and this chart is the result. So as you can see, between 2001 and 2013, most Americans felt good about race relations. Then both lines take a nosedive. It's no exaggeration to call this one of the greatest crises of our time.
Yeah, no shit. Focusing on skin color and trying to make laws and stuff based on skin color, or giving jobs and stuff because of skin color, is obviously going to cause a lot more division than unity.
And clearly, we need new ways of thinking about race if we're going to reverse this trend. So today, I'm going to offer an old idea, but it's an idea that's been widely misunderstood. You've probably heard it before. It's called color blindness.
Color blindness, when people would talk about it, it would sound pretty cringe because we see color. You know, when I'm in the metro and a black dude walks past, I can see that the dude is black, right? So it sounds very airy-fairy to say I don't see color or whatever, because that's just not accurate. Quick pause in the video. If you are enjoying my content, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel. If you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee or you can buy some merch, and I've got the links all below. Back to the video.
What do I mean by color blindness? After all, we all see race. We can't help it. And what's more, race can influence how we're treated and how we treat other people. So in that sense, nobody is truly colorblind. But to interpret the word colorblind so literally is to misunderstand it. Colorblind is a word like warm-hearted. It uses a physical metaphor to capture an abstract idea. To call someone warm-hearted isn't to talk about the temperature of their heart, but about the kindness of their soul. And similarly, to advocate for colorblindness is not to pretend you don't notice race. It's to support a principle that we should try our best to treat people without regard to race, both in our personal lives and in our public policy.
That right there, it's like sweet music to me. Imagine if that's what was being pushed on social media and in news and in policies and that sort of stuff, not making their skin color to be the main reason for how you treat them, whether it's positive or negative. I don't know if you guys remember the whole Black Lives Matter thing. During that whole thing, there were some things that happened that were so cringe to me. I know in America there were, and in Canada, there was this thing where white people kneeled in front of black people apologizing. Like, what are you apologizing for? Like, and in an effort to get rid of racism, it seems like people are amplifying it by doing weird things like that, right? I don't know. That shit's so cringe to me, bruh. Like, so cringe.
And you might be thinking, what's so controversial about that? Well, the fact is, the philosophy of colorblindness is under attack. Critics say that it's naive, or that we're not yet ready for it as a society, or even that it's white supremacy in disguise.
I would think that left-leaning governments and people would be pushing this message more. Let's work to make things equal and give equal opportunity to everyone, regardless of what they look like. If there's a community that is doing a lot worse, yes, we can invest in the community and whatever, so that the education levels come up and blah, 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 and all of that good stuff. It seems to me that left-leaning people are a lot more hyper-focused on the color of someone's skin. That's just my observation. Let me know what you think.
And many people agree with these feelings. For example, a few years ago, a young adult fantasy author came under pressure to halt the release of her new book. Why? Because the marketing blurb for the book went like this: In a world where the princess is the monster, oppression is blind to skin color, and good and evil exist in shades of gray.
Hey, that sounds like a dope little blurb for a book. I don't see why. Oh, I see. Oppression is blind to skin color, which is a fact, by the way. Oppression is blind to skin color.
Now, that one sentence clause about oppression being blind to skin color, describing a fantasy world, mind you, was enough to provoke an online backlash. Now, part of this reaction to color blindness is actually the fault of its advocates. People will say things like, "I don't see color," as a way of expressing support for colorblindness. But this phrase is guaranteed to produce confusion, because you do see color, right? I think we should all get rid of this phrase and replace it with what we really mean to say, which is, I try to treat people without regard to race.
That is beautiful. I try and treat people equally regardless of their race. Like, what is controversial about that phrase? That sounds like what we need to be doing.
Now, that said, most of the pushback to colorblindness comes from critics who misrepresent it as somehow a conservative idea. Now, this could not be further from the truth. The philosophy of colorblindness does not come from conservatives. It actually comes from the radical wing of the anti-slavery movement in the 19th century. The earliest mentions of colorblindness come from Wendell Phillips, who was the president of the American Anti-Slavery Society and a man whose nickname was Abolition's Golden Trumpet. He believed in immediate full equality for Black Americans, and in 1865, he called for the creation of a, quote, government colorblind, by which he meant the permanent end of all laws that mention race. What about the other critiques of colorblindness? Wouldn't colorblindness render us unable to fight racism? Wouldn't it mean getting rid of policies like affirmative action that benefit people of color? I believe that eliminating race-based policies does not equal eliminating policies meant to reduce inequality. It simply means that those policies should be executed on the basis of class instead of race. Why class over race? I'll give two reasons. First, because class is almost always a better proxy for true disadvantage.
It doesn't matter what skin color you are. You can be poor as hell or really rich. Like, the opportunities are abundant, at least in the West. And this idea that all Black people are poor or all white people are rich, I mean, that might have been true at some point, but it's definitely not the case right now. Especially here in Finland, where I am, I see really poor white people shuffling along on the street with alcohol and stuff.
Imagine we picked 10 Americans at random, and our task is to sort them from least privileged on one end to most privileged on the other. Now, there's no direct measure of privilege, so we have to choose a proxy measure. My claim here is that lining them up by income or wealth would get us closer to achieving that task than simply lining people up by race. That's what I mean when I say that class is usually a better proxy for disadvantage than race.
Like, that makes so much sense to my mind. When someone is in need, they are in need regardless of what they look like. The amount of money someone makes is a better scale as opposed to the color of someone's skin. I absolutely agree with that.
The second reason is that class-based policies tend to be more popular and less controversial because they don't penalize anyone for immutable biological traits. Think of policies like need-based financial aid or the earned income tax credit. These are policies that address inequality without anyone having to feel the sting of racial discrimination. I want to give you an example of a disastrous race-based policy. It was called the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Over 70,000 restaurants closed in 2020 due to the pandemic, and this fund allocated $29 billion to help these restaurants. But for the first 3 weeks of the program, only people of color, women, and veterans could apply. So soon after it began, white male restaurant owners sued, alleging discrimination. A judge ruled in their favor, and the program was stopped. But by that time, 2/3 of the money was already gone. And it wasn't just white men that got discriminated against in this policy. Around 3,000 women and people of color were promised money before the judge stopped the program, and then unpromised that money just after. And the remaining $10 billion then went to white men who had initially been put at the back of the line. So the net result of this policy was a double dose of discrimination.
You see, things like this I find horribly fascinating. There's a real danger in using something like skin color as a marker because it's so easy to group a bunch of people and just dehumanize them and label them as something. And not only that, it's very easy to reach back into the past, take the sins of the past and imbue it onto this new group of people who may look the same as the oppressors of old, but they are not the same people. And I just think that that's one way to keep racial tensions going.
Initially, thousands of white men were discriminated against, and then thousands of women and people of color were discriminated against. And it's a virtual guarantee that there are people out there who lost their restaurant in both of those camps because they were the wrong skin color. Can anyone really argue that a colorblind program wouldn't have produced better results for everybody? So I just gave an example of a disastrous race-based policy. Now I want to give you an example of a colorblind policy that has worked quite well. America has been struggling with the issue of racial bias in policing for a very long time. And a solution to one aspect of this problem is to issue tickets using traffic cameras instead of human beings. Cops can be racially biased, consciously or not, but traffic cameras, red light cameras, and speeding cameras can't. So you would think anyone interested in reducing racial bias in policing would support these traffic cameras, but you'd be wrong. Some have opposed them on the grounds that they don't yield statistically equal ticketing rates by race, and they remain illegal in many US states. So here's an example where the philosophy of colorblindness cuts through confusion like a knife. If we're guided by colorblindness, our goal should be to eliminate bias from systems that affect people's lives wherever possible, not to manufacture statistically equal outcomes by any means necessary.
I think this is another really big contention, right? It's the difference between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. To create equality of outcome, you have to manufacture a lot of things. As an example, imagine there aren't enough Asian doctors, right? What do you do with that? Do you try and manufacture the outcome by, I don't know, making it easier for Asian people to pass and stuff, or to give them free passes into different levels of education, or what do? You see, that's equality of outcome. And by doing that, it causes tension and it makes things a lot more racially divisive because you want someone to be there because they earned it. Whereas equality of opportunity is just trying to make things as equal as they can be so that anyone can achieve what they want to achieve if they are willing to work hard for it. I can understand trying to invest in a community so that the people can grow and increase knowledge, and so that they can get into school because of their knowledge, not because of what they look like.
So my talk has been focused on America, but my message is really for any key decision maker at any institution anywhere in the world. If you care about fighting racism, embrace colorblindness. Support class-based policies. Create colorblind processes in your own world. If you're a professor, grade your students' papers blind to their names. Think creatively about how to apply colorblindness to your life. Colorblindness is the best principle by which to govern a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy.
I absolutely love the message in this. On a certain level, it's up to us to start thinking creatively and how we can be less biased. We can't ignore that. It's true, we are biased, but trying to actively work towards being less biased by creating systems that make you look at other things as opposed to the color of someone's skin, that is brilliant. I don't know how this is not the way of thinking that we are all pushing for, because this is healthy, it's good, and I think it brings everyone together. I think people can more easily understand that, okay, we need to invest in this community because they are financially unable to do something. People can understand that a lot better than, no, we're going to invest in this community simply because of their skin color or because they're black or Asian or whatever.
It's the best way to lower the temperature of tribal conflict in the long run. And if we wait for the moment when society is ready for it, we'll be waiting forever. Thank you.
Coleman, thank you for this. You know, Melody Hobson came to TED a few years ago, and she had a very different message for us. She said, be color brave, not colorblind. Her argument was that being colorblind is dangerous because it's effectively ignoring the problem. What would you want to say to her?
First of all, if I were to say that just makes zero sense to me. Treating someone equally, regardless of what they look like, is dangerous?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing I would say is, like I said, colorblindness as a philosophy, that is the goal. That's an idea that comes from the anti-slavery movement, right? That's not an example of ignoring the problem. That's an example of having the best philosophy with which to address the problem, in my view.
Boom. Just like that. Well done, bruh. Well done.
But could you argue that that dealt with one part of the problem, but in today's world, there are still many situations where it's not enough? So to take the story of, so here's an orchestra, right? An orchestra, and it's largely white. And that doesn't feel right. So they institute a policy of color blindness where, you know, there can't be any racial discrimination because new musicians are auditioned behind a screen. That's colorblind. So far, so good. And maybe that helps. But maybe the actual situation is that the minority kids in that area just don't have access to instruments. It's just harder for them ever to get the kind of training and stuff they need. And that the orchestra needs to be taking a lead to bring people through so that there are people in that orchestra who can inspire other kids and so forth.
I can tell you what the solution isn't. It's to bring a kid into the orchestra, even if he or she is not up to scratch in terms of their talent or their skill, and put them into the orchestra simply because of the way they look, because that is a terrible way of doing things. You see, that's equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. That's trying to manufacture things, and it's detrimental to all of us.
Yeah, so I would propose a different. So if I were leading that orchestra, what I would do is I'd say, let's continue to audition everyone behind the veil, be colorblind in that sense, and then let's separately invest in the community so that we can get kids instruments when they're young, and then judge them by a colorblind standard when they come to audition. See, if you rig it at this level, then you're just changing the bar by which you would measure progress to begin with, right? So I think that is a kind of an artificial solution, whereas we want to maintain colorblind standards but actually address the root causes of the problem.
Well done. I love that. I absolutely love that. I think the most important thing is that we need to check ourselves, and in our own lives start applying some of these concepts, this idea of treating people because of the content of their hearts, because of their minds and the things that they say and do, not because of the way they look. I think this is the way forward. I completely agree. I like this idea of, even in policy, trying to implement colorblind policies that and we're talking about colorblindness as a philosophy, not in terms of what you can actually tangibly see. And I absolutely love this. But guys, this was a really long video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you enjoy me doing other content like this. I'm thinking of starting to do more videos like this where I talk about random things that I find interesting or intriguing. I've got a lot to say on some of these issues, but let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to watch the full video below. It's Coleman Hughes at TED Talk, and I'm still blown away that this was seen as very controversial. It's really wild to me. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. Give me a like, subscribe to the channel, and see you next time. Ciao.